Business Support Fund 3 is the next round of what we've seen already of two supported funds, obviously, with three different funds of 10,000 and 20,000. And even within this fund as well, we have different categories of funding from 10,000, 15,000 and 20,000, depending on your business sector. So it's the next initiative, obviously, of Business Victoria to support business within the state, which is fantastic, and to be complimented for that as well. I think what really have to people look at it now is how it's changed and evolved from the different funding rounds. And you have to pay a little bit more attention, a little bit more detail to your application now, not only in terms of having your ABN and register for GST and ACN and register with ASIC, but make sure obviously your content's going to be there as justification as to why basically you need that support funding, and have that narrative, that 500-word narrative in that text box that you're going to be required to populate in section 3. So it's integral now, I think, to have a planned process to be grant ready for this grant funding round. And while it can be done through due process stage to stage and go through it, if you have all the information at hand, there's a little bit more expected of you now. Very much people should be investing the time to create their business narrative. I mean, there's an expectation, obviously, you're going to assemble your P&Ls, your income tax return, your annual payroll, which you pick the options, obviously, which category you're in regards to that. You're registered with WorkSafe, you have the quantifiable amount of people, how many people you're employing, obviously. But it's understanding that you're going to have to create the narrative around it as well. That question is there for a reason. And while the rest of it's stats and facts based and due process that you can tick the box per se, that you've registered credentials as a business basically to apply, you need to look at really expanding on the narrative rather than just saying my business has been affected in the downturn of COVID-19. I think that's your first sentence, but I think you need to be more expansive into what way and by what factors, and understanding basically in what geographical area of operations you are, or even in what sector of operations. Clear, concise, compelling. Just understand if you're going to draft that 500 words, make sure basically that it reads well, flows well, it's not staccato. You have the opportunity, obviously, to employ all the data that you want and assemble that data and work with either, an accountant or a bookkeeper that's across that. But you may want to look at working at a content writer or a grants writer to help you put it across that 500-word narrative. Basically, it's the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why of your business. And then how much you want, obviously, how much you require through this COVID funding to justify that. So you need to show the downturn data, obviously, but you need to justify that with narrative as well, which is basically reciprocating on the data that shows there's been a downturn in your business, but explain, the effects that COVID's had, basically downturn in footfall traffic, even downturn in online business as well, basically. So there's a bit more detail required, as I've said already, than round 1 and round 2. So you're going to have to spend time drafting, editing, and proofreading your actual content to write it. So, you can't just try and put in that one-liner. I would advocate strongly that you put in something more than the one-liner when it asks you to justify the reason or the effect that COVID-19's had in your business, and really be ardent about how you expand on that and what you're going to say to justify that funding. Government is rightly risk averse, all right? So it's understanding having a risk matrix or a risk management template done for your business anyway. I mean, the expectation as a business that if you're an ardent, articulate business, you're understanding what risk is in your business sector outside of something like a COVID-19 pandemic. So it's a risk register, it's a risk matrix. So government are always risk averse, and rightly so. It's public sector funding. They have to quantify and qualify with great authenticity and justification of where they're giving the funding and what's eligible to apply. So you should reciprocate as a business and understand and identify those risks and mitigate those risks, and not just see the Business Support Fund as a one-off grants opportunity from Victorian government, but obviously as part of the wider support funds that are available, not only from state government, but from federal government as well. And it'd be a narrow focus as a business to look at one support fund. You need to look at what all other grants are out there, both the support funds and the business grants, of which there's been a multitude in the past couple of months. And you should be across that. And you need someone to help you with that, ideally, basically, again, someone who knows grants at the end of the day. So don't narrow the focus, and don't narrow what you're actually putting forward as terms of a business case or a business argument in terms of just mandatory justification. I think in round 1, we thought just apply and you have a very good chance of getting the funding. That's not the norm in grants, obviously. It's usually a competitive process. With round 2 and now with round 3, we're edging towards a way more competitive process with the Business Support Fund, basically, in terms of, I won't say the word restrictions, but in terms of what they're focusing on, what areas and what areas in the business sector they're focusing on, rather than generic, they're looking at specific. feel free to contact me at the Grants Guy on my website, or all my contact details are listed there, and I'm happy to help any businesses identify what grants are out there, talk them through the application process, and then talk them through the equivalent auditing and evaluation process. And in terms of doing the mandatory reporting and delivering on that grant, which is very, very important as well, obviously, just as much as it is getting it right first time in the application process. So feel free to contact the Grants Guy at thegrantsguy.com.au as a resource and service to help you out basically in not only this grant application, but all the other grant applications that you may be eligible for within your business sector. And even looking at tenders now, which businesses should be looking at. We're going to see a rejuvenation of, obviously, as much as government have always mandated outsourcing contracts. There's going to be a lot now as a stimulus package, really, in terms of growing business sectors by outsourcing contracts. So I would advise businesses to be wary of what grants are out there. Have a grants calendar, or go to someone immersed in the grant sector like myself who's be able to present that grants calendar to you. But also keep an eye on the tendering contracts you potentially could go for as well.